Hello and welcome to the European VC, your go-to podcast for insights into the European VC industry. Broadcasting from Denmark, I'm Andreas Monkholm.
And from Portugal, I am David Cruz Silva.
We are your hosts for today's episode. If you would like to suggest topics or guests for future episodes, please do reach out to us at theeuropeanvc.com. If you're about to raise an international round, do feel free to reach out to us for an introduction to relevant VCs.
We are joined by Stephan Morais, founder and managing partner of Indico Capital Partners, a leading early-stage deep tech VC firm based in Portugal. Stephan was formerly an executive board member at Caixa Capital, where he led investment rounds in many Portuguese global tech success stories. I am particularly excited to be talking with Stephan. First of all, because we share the same home country, Portugal. But most importantly, Stephan has been a major player in building up the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Portugal. Stephan's portfolio includes the likes of Farfetch, an online luxury retail platform selling products from over 700 boutiques and brands from around the world, which actually went public on 2018 and is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And Babel, an AI-powered human translation platform focused on the translation of customer service communications, and Tier, a micro-mobility company providing electric scooter ride-sharing services. With a diversified background as an investment banker, consultant, entrepreneur, and CEO, he has lived in 8 countries and 4 continents over the last 24 years. Stephan, also the founding curator of the Global Shapers Lisbon Hub, was appointed as a young global leader by the World Economic Forum in 2010 and is a member of their Digital Leaders of Europe community.
Stephan, welcome to the European VC and thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. Before starting our chat about VC in Europe, we'd like to get to know you a little better. I've heard that you have a backstory as an athlete. Would you care to elaborate?
Well, my big passion is surfing. I love what I do, but I also love to have a family and to surf. And so I've been surfing since, over 34 years now. Now the kids are surfing. And yes, I used to compete a bit, never in a real professional way. But while I was at university and beyond that, I love the ocean. I've traveled all over the world for surfing, and I intend to keep on doing that with the kids, hopefully.
That's quite awesome. I'm almost tempted to say there's a trend between what we consider successful VCs and backgrounds and interests in sports. Our first episode was with Mark Lorman, who also tried his hand at professional tennis as a kid and reached quite top ranks worldwide. Stephan, many Portuguese tech success stories are connected to you in the sense that you were, in many cases, an investor in these companies. I know you had a decisive role in building the Portuguese ecosystem, and I would love to hear a bit more about your path into VC and particularly your experience in this emerging ecosystem, Portugal.
Look, I guess I found out that I wanted to be a VC when I did my MBA at Harvard Business School. I had one of the subjects was venture capital and private equity with Professor Josh Lerner, who is, the global authority on private equity and VC, and an amazing human being, and obviously a very, very talented and smart professor. And, I had already done a startup in London back in the .com boom, and then the subsequent bust when I was at HBS. And I realized that, private equity and VC would be, my career of choice. But life takes its time, and I did lots of other things in the middle, but always with an eye of getting closer to becoming a professional investor. And I actually think that now looking back, having done lots of other things, being on the different sides of the table as an advisor, as a CEO, and as an entrepreneur really helps me have a broader look and a deeper understanding of how entrepreneurs feel. And that's why we really try at Indico to be added value and to be close and to be as useful as possible to the teams and to the companies, because I felt it on my own companies when I didn't have the right investors, what that means for the future of the company and for your general level of happiness. So eventually I ended up joining full-time Caixa Capital and heading up venture capital right at the beginning of the sort of the boom of the Portuguese VC scene, which is also partially the boom of many other countries in Europe, in about 10 years ago or so, where things were starting really to heat up, and the first few success stories were starting to come out of Portugal as they were from other countries, and in particular Portugal, because it's a very small market. The Portuguese companies tend to become global immediately, or at least try to become global immediately, trying to sort of target the US market and the UK market and so on. So actually small is beautiful in the case of VC and technology. And we were very fortunate to have backed many of those success stories. And actually one of the few that we didn't was Talkdesk, which is a company co-founded by my current partner, Cristina Fonseca, current partner at the fund. And so that was one of the few that we couldn't get our hands on because they were already in the US. They had gone through 500 startups. They already had quite a few big name VCs in there. And so we were late. But essentially it's a fun profession. I'm not surprised that a lot of people are interested in this profession, but it is a profession that requires, I think, some experience and some well-rounded experiences in things that go well and things that don't go well, because in general things in VC don't go well, and so you need to be ready for that as well, and then try to enjoy the few successes that compensate for the whole thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I love the "small is beautiful," almost a perfect slogan for the Portuguese ecosystem. That actually brings me to another topic regarding Portugal. During your period of ecosystem building, and I'm using this expression generously, did you feel that there was a lack of specialized capital supporting early stage startups in Portugal? And I ask this because mature ecosystems need not only capital, of course, but also specialized operational support to help companies grow and scale internationally. And I wonder if this is one of the factors that ended up motivating you to start Indico.
Well, I mean, it's indeed, ecosystems like Portugal or even Denmark, which is also kind of similar size, they need not only specialized, knowledgeable investors, but they need experienced entrepreneurs as well, and they need experienced angels. And this is something, and of course, corporates that are willing also to work with these startups, because quite often you need to start with having local pilots. Even if you're in a small market, you need local partners, you need knowledge sharing, and eventually you need senior, knowledgeable, people that can join the companies. And so it's not something that you can build only with money. Time really takes. It's really an important factor here, because you first create the few early stage success stories. Then they need to recruit abroad. They need to get capital abroad for later stages. Still today, I mean, and I think it will keep on being like this. There's some natural places in the world where capital is more concentrated. In the case of Europe, it's been typically London, and in the US, it's been typically Silicon Valley. But there's obviously other places. But you need the angels, and who are the angels? The angels typically are people that were former entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs. But if you haven't had a tech ecosystem before, how can you have those kind of angels? And if you don't have lots of big corporates that are in the tech sector, if you don't have even the Googles and Facebooks and Apples and so on, where do you recruit from when you need more senior people? So it is inevitable that when you are sort of building an ecosystem, things take time, and you sort of need to intervene. And I wasn't, on the policy side of it, but when we were at Caixa was a public bank, and so there was a factor of sort of market making in sort of supporting the angels with capital from Caixa, supporting the accelerators with sponsorship and with capital and with knowledge. And so I think what we tried to do was to sort of create a number of actors that would be necessary for the future of the ecosystem, so that we could then invest and kind of cherry pick the best companies that were emanating from the relations from all those partners. And I think we ended up being very lucky and quite successful at that, and hence the decision to sort of do your own independent fund, which is something that is fundamental in an ecosystem. You cannot only have public related entities or corporate related entities, because those depend on policy, and they depend also on sort of market swings and moods. And when you have independent venture capital funds, that's their core business. So there will not be a CEO that says, oh, my profits are down, and so now I'm going to kill sort of the corporate accelerator or the corporate fund because I have to concentrate on my core business. Or a change of government that says, actually, a priority is no longer innovation or entrepreneurship, and now I need to, dedicate resources to healthcare or education, which obviously they should. So you need to, in all these countries, to have eventually independent, robust big or fairly big in funds that can actually drive the system. And then with the success stories coming out, the entrepreneurs, they become angels, they become investors themselves, like Christina did in our fund. And that's sort of the beauty of the sort of the rolling snowball that keeps on growing.
And that's very interesting, Stephan, because I'd love to pick up on this point about market makers, because at least in Denmark, what we're seeing is often that the tech entrepreneurs, once they've exited, and then they typically transfer into becoming angels. They very rarely transfer into becoming LPs. How was it for you and your fundraising? Was it these guys who became your LPs, or could you find other LPs who were willing to put money behind you?
Well, actually, in our case, the majority of the capital came from institutional sources, sort of funds of funds internationally, and also from high net worth individuals that were not necessarily related. They were not angels. They were not former tech entrepreneurs. The majority. And the majority of our capital is also foreign, is not Portuguese. And this happens a little bit across Europe where, the countries that are more risk averse or that have less developed capital markets, these types of asset classes, which are considered to be more risky, like venture capital or hedge funds or commodities, they are not the preferred asset classes of more traditional institutional or individual investors in these countries. You need to have bigger countries and countries where these asset classes have shown results for people to actually understand and to invest. So in our case, it was not the local entrepreneurs that were successful. In fact, because it didn't exist yet. I mean, we're yet to see major exits happen, with the exception of Farfetch and a few partial exits of a few other companies. But the truth is that there's not enough entrepreneurs, Portuguese entrepreneurs, that have made significant exits to sustain funds. Now, the second part that you mentioned is very interesting, which is the entrepreneurs, when they become successful, they tend to become angels themselves. That's, I think, great, and I think we need that. But it is also true that in the more sophisticated markets, and you see that in the UK, in the US, particularly in those markets which are very advanced compared to the rest of the world, the entrepreneurs also become investors in funds. But I mean, quite often people think that they can do it by themselves. They'll do it alone. They know better because they were successful. And the profession of being an entrepreneur is not the same profession of being a venture capitalist or a professional investor. There are obvious advantages in terms of being able to understand the technology, understanding how to grow a company, having been there and seen it and done it. But there are other dimensions to becoming a professional investor which are not taught in the entrepreneurial road. And that's why within a VC firm, you don't have only entrepreneurs normally. You also have people with different backgrounds. Again, diversity is good in terms of thinking, and people shouldn't all be investment bankers, and they shouldn't all be entrepreneurs. So I think that some entrepreneurs would also benefit from being LPs in funds where they can be present, but where they can also become aware of the nuances of becoming an investor, rather than investing everything by themselves. But it's the stage, or it's the sort of stage of history that we are, where everybody is very egocentrical and everybody thinks that they're very unique and very special. I mean, we don't think we're very unique and special. I think we try to do a good job. We love what we do. We've been rather successful at doing it, but it's early days. Most ecosystems in Europe are in early stage, but there's certainly a lot of talent. There's certainly a lot of science. A very highly educated population across Europe, and Portugal and Denmark are certainly no exception. And so I think it's a great time to invest in European startups.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the same thing in Denmark, and I think that this podcast is also a symptom of the fact that the European ecosystem is only just maturing now. And we're seeing a much bigger focus both on the startup side, but also on the investment side, which of course our podcast is the poster boy for. But Stephan, I'd love to jump a bit more into what you said about you getting the institutional LPs into your fund. I'm interested to hear, and I think that many in our audience as emerging managers would be as well. What do you think swayed them to invest in your fund?
Yes, I mean it's a difficult path for sure. It's a rocky road that when we're